Chapter 33 of Sir Gibbie. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Devorah Allen. Sir Gibbie by George MacDonald. Chapter 33. The Mains. They reached at length the valley road. The water that ran in the bottom was the Lorrie. 3 days ago it was a lively little stream, winding and changing within its grassy banks, here resting silent in a deep pool, there running and singing over its pebbles. Now it had filled and far overflowed its banks, and was a swift river. It had not yet, so far up the valley, encroached on the road, but the torrents on the mountain had already in places much injured it, and with considerable difficulty they crossed some of the new-made gullies. When they approached the bridge, however, by which they must cross the Lorrie to reach the Mains, their worst trouble lay before them. For the enemy, with whose reinforcements they had all the time been descending, showed himself ever in greater strength the farther they advanced, and here the road was flooded for a long way on both sides of the bridge. There was therefore a good deal of wading to be done, but the road was an embankment, there was little current, and in safety at last they ascended the rising ground on which the farm buildings stood. When they reached the yard, they sent Gibbie to find shelter for Crummie, and themselves went up to the house. "The Lord preserve us!" cried Jean Mavor, with uplifted hands when she saw them enter the kitchen. "He'll do that, mem," returned Janet, with a smile. "But what can he do? Gien ye be drawn out to the hills, what's to come o' us in the how? I would ken that," said Jean. "The water's not up to your door yet," remarked Janet. "God forbid!" retorted Jean, as if the very mention of such a state of things was too dreadful to be polite. "But you'd wit." "Wit's not the word," said Robert, trying to laugh, but failing from sheer exhaustion, and the beginnings of an asthmatic attack. The farmer, hearing their voices, came into the kitchen. A middle-sized and middle-aged, rather coarse-looking man, with keen eyes, who took snuff amazingly. His manner was free with a touch of satire. He was proud of driving a hard bargain, but was thoroughly hospitable. He had little respect for person or thing, but showed an occasional touch of tenderness. "Hoot, Rob," he said roughly as he entered, "I thought ye had mair sense. What's brought ye here at sic a time?" But as he spoke he held out his snuff-box to the old man. "Fell needcessity, sir," answered Robert, taking a good pinch. "Necessity!" retorted the farmer. "Was ye oot a meal?" "Oot a dry meal, I doubt by this time, sir," replied Robert. "Hoots! I wuss we were all in like necessity, well up upon the hill instead of down here upon the how. It's just clean ridiculous. You should have kenned better at your age, Rob. You should have thought twice, man." "'Deed, sir," answered Robert, quietly finishing his pinch of snuff. "There was small need and less time to think, and Glashgar burstin', and the water comin' ower the tap o' the bit hoosie as gien 'twar a muckle owershot wheel, and not a place for folk to bide in. Ye dinna think Janet and me would be twa sic auld fools as put on our Sunday clothes to swim in, gien we thought to see things as we left them when we gaed back? Ye see, sir, though the house be faunt upon a rock, it's maist biggit o' fells, and the foundation's a' I look even to see o't again. When the force o' the water grows less, it'll come down upon the riggin' wi' the hale weight of it." "Ay," said Janet in a low voice, "the live stones maun come to the live rock to big the house it'll stand." "What think ye, Maister Fergus, you 'at's goin' to be a minister?" said Robert, referring to his wife's words, as the young man looked in at the door of the kitchen. "Let him be," interposed his father, blowing his nose with unnecessary violence. "Setna him preachin' afore his time. Fess the whusky, Fergus, an' gie auld Robert a dram. Haith, gien the water be rinnin' ower the tap o' your house, man, it was time to flit. Fess 2 or 3 glasses, Fergus. We hae need of something that's not water. It's perfectly ridiculous." Having taken a little of the whisky, the old people went to change their clothes for some Jean had provided, and in the meantime she made up her fire and prepared some breakfast for them. "And whaur's your dummy?" she asked as they re-entered the kitchen. "He had poor Crummie to look efter," answered Janet, "but he might hae been in or this time." "He'll be wi' Donal in the byre, no doubt," said Jean. "He's aye some shy o' comin' in wantin' an inveet." She went to the door and called with a loud voice across the yard, through the wind and the clashing torrents. "Donal! Send Dummie in till his breakfast." "He's away till his sheep," cried Donal in reply. "Preserve us! The cratur'll be lost!" said Jean. "Less likely nor any man about the place," bawled Donal, half angry with his mistress for calling his friend dummy. "Gibbie kens better what he's about nor any two 'at thinks him a fool 'cause he canna let out such stuff and nonsense as they canna hold in." Jean went back to the kitchen, only half reassured concerning her brownie, and far from contented with his absence. But she was glad to find that neither Janet nor Robert appeared alarmed at the news. "I wuss the cratur had had some breakfast," she said. "He has a piece in his pouch," answered Janet. "He's no unprovided with what can be made mair o'." "I dinna rightly understan' ye there," said Jean. "Ye canna hae failt to remark, mem," answered Janet, "'at when the maester set himsel' to feed the hungerin' thousands, he took intil his han' what there was, an' wrought upo' that to mak mair o' 't. I hae wussed sometimes that the laddie wi' the 5 barley loaves and the 2 sma' fishes hadna been there that day. I wad fain ken hoo the master wad hae managed wantin' onything to begin upon. As it was, he aye hang what he did upon something his father had done afore him." "Hoots!" returned Jean, who looked upon Janet as a lover of conundrums. "Ye're aye wrastlin' wi' run knots an' tuch mouthfuls." "Oh, na, no I," answered Janet. "Only whiles, when the speerit o' spierin' gets the upper hand o' me for a season." "I doobt that same speerit 'll lead ye far from the still waters some day, Janet," said Jean, stirring the porridge vehemently. "Oh, I think not," answered Janet very calmly. "When the master says, 'What's that to thee?' I take care he hasna to say it twice, but just get up and follow him." This was beyond Jean, but she held her peace, for though she feared for Janet's orthodoxy, and had a strong opinion of the superiority of her own common sense, in which, as in the case of all who pride themselves in the same, there was a good deal more of the common than of the sense, she had the deepest conviction of Janet's goodness, and regarded her as a sort of heaven-favoured idiot, whose utterances were somewhat privileged. Janet, for her part, looked upon Jean as "an honest woman, who'll get a heap o' licht some day." When they had eaten their breakfast, Robert took his pipe to the barn, saying there was not much danger of fire that day. Janet washed up the dishes and sat down to her book, and Jean went out and in, attending to many things. Meantime the rain fell, the wind blew, the water rose. Little could be done beyond feeding the animals, threshing a little corn in the barn, and twisting straw ropes for the thatch of the ricks of the coming harvest, if indeed there was a harvest on the road, for as the day went on it seemed almost to grow doubtful whether any ropes would be wanted, while already not a few of last year's ricks from farther up the country were floating past the Mains, down the Dower to the sea. The sight was a dreadful one, had an air of the day of judgment about it to farmers' eyes. From the Mains, to right and left beyond the rising ground on which the farm buildings stood, everywhere as far as the bases of the hills, instead of fields, was water, yellow-brown, here in still expanse or slow progress, there sweeping along in fierce current. The quieter parts of it were dotted with trees, divided by hedges, shaded with ears of corn, upon the swifter parts floated objects of all kinds. Mr. Duff went wandering restlessly from one spot to another, finding nothing to do. In the gloaming, which fell the sooner that a rain blanket miles thick wrapped the earth up from the sun, he came across from the barn, and entering the kitchen, dropped weary with hopelessness on a chair. "I can weel unnerstan'," he said, "what for the Lord sud set down Bony, and set up Louis, but what for he sud gar corn grow, and syne send a spate to swim awa wi' it, that's mair nor mortal man can see the sense o'. Haud your tongue, Janet. I'm no sayin' there's onything wrong. I'm sayin' naething but the sair truth, and I cannot see the what for o' 't. I cannot see the good o' 't till onybody. A'thing's on the road to the German Ocean. The land's just meltin' awa into the sea." Janet sat silent, knitting hard at a stocking she had got hold of that Jean had begun for her brother. She knew argument concerning the uses of adversity was vain with a man who knew of no life but that which consisted in eating and drinking, sleeping and rising, working and getting on in the world. As to such things existing only that they may subserve a real life, he was almost as ignorant, notwithstanding he was an elder of the church, as any heathen. From being nearly in the centre of its own land, the farmsteading of the Mains was at a considerable distance from any other. But there were 2 or 3 cottages upon the land, and as the evening drew on, another aged pair, who lived in one only a few hundred yards from the house, made their appearance, and were soon followed by the wife of the foreman with her children, who lived farther off. Quickly the night closed in, and Gibbie was not come. Robert was growing very uneasy. Janet kept comforting and reassuring him. "There's one thing," said the old man. "Oscar's with him." "Ay," responded Janet, unwilling, in the hearing of others, to say a word that might seem to savour of rebuke to her husband, yet pained that he should go to the dog for comfort. "Ay, he's a well-made animal, Oscar. There's been a foth o' sheep care pittin' intil him. Ye see, him 'at made him, bein' a shepherd himsel', kens what's wanted o' the dog." None but her husband understood what lay behind the words. "Oscar's no with him," said Donal. "The dog cam to me in the byre, lang after Gibbie was away, greetin' like and lookin' for him." Robert gave a great sigh, but said nothing. Janet did not sleep a wink that night. She had so many to pray for. Not Gibbie only, but every one of her family was in perils of waters, all being employed along the valley of the Daur. It was not, she said, confessing to her husband her sleeplessness, that she was afraid. She was only keeping them company, and holding the gate open, she said. The latter phrase was her picture paraphrase for praying. She never said she prayed. She held the gate open. The wonder is but small that Donal should have turned out a poet. The dawn appeared, but the farm had vanished. Not even heads of growing corn were anywhere more to be seen. The loss would be severe, and John Duff's heart sank within him. The sheep which had been in the mown clover field that sloped to the burn were now all in the cornyard, and the water was there with them. If the rise did not soon cease, every rick would be afloat. There was little current, however, and not half the danger there would have been had the houses stood a few 100 yards in any direction from where they were. "Tak your breakfast, John," said his sister. "Let them take it hungers," he answered. "Tak, or ye'll no hae the what to save," said Jean. Thereupon he fell to and ate, if not with appetite, then with a will that was wondrous. The flood still grew, and still the rain poured, and Gibbie did not come. Indeed, no one any longer expected him, whatever might have become of him. Except by boat, the Mains was inaccessible now, they thought. Soon after breakfast, notwithstanding, a strange woman came to the door. Jean, who opened it to her knock, stood and stared speechless. It was a grey-haired woman, with a more disreputable look than her weather-flouted condition would account for. "Gran with her for the ducks," she said. "Whaur come ye frae?" returned Jean, who did not relish the freedom of her address. "Frae ower by," she answered. "And hoo wan ye here?" "Upon my 2 legs." Jean looked this way and that over the watery waste, and again stared at the woman in growing bewilderment. They came afterwards to the conclusion that she had arrived, probably half drunk, the night before, and passed it in one of the outhouses. "Your legs maun be langer nor they look then, woman," said Jean, glancing at the lower part of the stranger's person. The woman only laughed, a laugh without any laughter in it. "What's your wull, now that you are here?" continued Jean with severity. "Ye came not to the Mains to tell them there what kind o' weather it was." "I came whaur I could win," answered the woman. "And for my wull, that's nothing to naebody noo. It's no as it was once, though gien I could get it, there might be mair nor me the better for it. And sae as you would gang the length o' a glass o' whusky—" "Ye s' get nae whusky here," interrupted Jean with determination. The woman gave a sigh, and half turned away as if she would depart. But however she might have come, it was plainly impossible she should depart and live. "Woman," said Jean, "ken an' I care naething about ye, an' mair, I dinna like ye, nor the look o' ye. An' gien it war a fine simmer night 'at a body could lie there out, or gang the farther, I would steek the door in yer face, but that I darena do the day against my neebours so. Sae ye can come in an' sit down, an' my mind spoken, ye s' get what'll haud the life in ye, an' a puckle straw in the barn. Only ye maun just hae a quiet sough, for the guidman disna like tramps." "Tramps here, tramps there!" exclaimed the woman, starting into high displeasure. "I would hae ye ken I'm an honest woman and no tramp." "Ye sudna look so like one then," said Jean coolly. "But come your ways in, and I s' say nothing so long as ye behave." The woman followed her, took the seat pointed out to her by the fire, and sullenly ate, without a word of thanks, the cakes and milk handed her, but seemed to grow better tempered as she ate, though her black eyes glowed at the food with something of disgust and more of contempt. She would rather have had a gill of whisky than all the milk on the Mains. On the other side of the fire sat Janet, knitting away busily with a look of ease and leisure. She said nothing, but now and then cast a kindly glance out of her grey eyes at the woman. There was an air of the lost sheep about the stranger, which, in whomsoever she might see it, always drew her affection. "She maun be one of them the maester came to call," she said to herself. But she was careful to suggest no approach, for she knew the sheep that has left the flock has grown wild, and is more suspicious and easily startled than one in the midst of its brethren. With the first of the light, some of the men on the farm had set out to look for Gibbie, well knowing it would be a hard matter to touch Glashgar. About 9 they returned, having found it impossible. One of them, caught in a current and swept into a hole, had barely escaped with his life. But they were unanimous that the dummy was better off in any cave on Glashgar than he would be in the best bedroom at the Mains if things went on as they threatened. Robert had kept on going to the barn and back again to the kitchen all the morning, consumed with anxiety about the son of his old age. But the barn began to be flooded, and he had to limit his prayer walk to the space between the door of the house and the chair where Janet sat, knitting busily, and praying with countenance untroubled, amidst the rush of the seaward torrents, the mad howling and screeching of the wind, and the lowing of the imprisoned cattle. "O Lord," she said in her great trusting heart, "gien my bonny man be drowning in the water, or deeing a cold on the hillside, haud his hand. Binna far frae him, O Lord, dinna let him be fleyt." To Janet, what we call life and death were comparatively small matters, but she was very tender over suffering and fear. She did not pray half so much for Gibbie's life as for the presence with him of him who is at the deathbed of every sparrow. She went on waiting, and refused to be troubled. True, she was not his bodily mother, but she loved him far better than the mother who, in such a dread for her child, would have been mad with terror. The difference was, that Janet loved up as well as down. Loved down so widely, so intensely, because the Lord of life, who gives his own to us, was more to her than any child can be to any mother, and she knew he could not forsake her Gibbie, and that his presence was more and better than life. She was unnatural, was she? Inhuman? Yes, if there be no such heart and source of humanity as she believed in. If there be, then such calmness and courage and content as hers are the mere human and natural condition to be hungered after by every aspiring soul. Not until such condition is mine shall I be able to regard life as a godlike gift, except in the hope that it is drawing nigh. Let him who understands understand better. Let him not say that good is less than perfect, or excuse his supineness and spiritual sloth by saying to himself that a man can go too far in his search after the divine, can sell too much of what he has to buy the field of the treasure. Either there is no Christ of God, or my all is his. Robert seemed at length to have ceased his caged wandering. For a quarter of an hour he had been sitting with his face buried in his hands. Janet rose, went softly to him, and said in a whisper, "Is Gibbie waur off, Robert, in this water upon Glashgar, nor the disciples in the boat upon yon loch o' Galilee, and the maester no come to them? Robert, my ain man, dinna garr the master say to ye, 'O ye o' little faith, wherefore did ye doubt?' Take heart, man, the maester winna hae his men be cowards." "Ye're right, Janet, ye're aye right," answered Robert, and rose. She followed him into the passage. "Where are ye going, Robert?" she said. "I wish I could tell ye," he answered. "I'm just hungerin' to be my lane. I wuss I had never left Glashgar. There's aye room there. Or gien I could win out among the rigs. There's none o' them left, but there's the rooks. They're no summin yet. I want to gang to the Lord, but I maunna wait Willie Mackay's claws." "It's a sair pity," said Janet, "'at the men folk disna learn to weave stockins, or dee something or other wi' their hands. Mony's the time my stockin's been maist as good as a closet to me, though I couldna just gang intil it. But what matters it? A prayer in the heart is sure to find the road out. The heart's the last place it can haud on in. A prayin' heart has nae roof till it." She turned and left him. Comforted by her words, he followed her back into the kitchen and sat down beside her. "Gibbie'll be here, mayhap, when ye least look for him," said Janet. Neither of them caught the wild, eager gleam that lighted the face of the strange woman at those last words of Janet. She looked up at her with the sharpest of glances, but the same instant compelled her countenance to resume its former expression of fierce indifference, and under that became watchful of everything said and done. Still the rain fell and the wind blew. The torrents came tearing down from the hills and shot madly into the rivers. The rivers ran into the valleys, and deepened the lakes that filled them. On every side of the mains, from the foot of Glashgar to Gormdhu, all was one yellow and red sea, with roaring currents and vortices numberless. It burrowed holes, it opened long deserted channels and watercourses. Here it deposited inches of rich mould, there yards of sand and gravel. Here it was carrying away fertile ground, leaving behind only bare rock or shingle where the corn had been waving. There it was scooping out the bed of a new lake. Many a thick, soft lawn of loveliest grass, dotted with fragrant shrubs and rare trees, vanished, and nothing was there when the waters subsided but a stony waste or a gravelly precipice. Woods and copses were undermined, and trees and soil together swept into the wash. Sometimes the very place was hardly there to say it knew its children no more. Houses were torn to pieces, and their contents, as from broken boxes, sent wandering on the brown waste, through the grey air to the discoloured sea, whose saltness for a long way out had vanished with its hue. Haymows were buried to the very top in sand. Others went sailing bodily down the mighty stream. Some of them followed or surrounded, like big ducks, by a great brood of ricks for their ducklings. Huge trees went past, as if shot down an alpine slide, cottages and bridges of stone giving way before them. Wooden mills, thatched roofs, great mill wheels went dipping and swaying and hobbling down. From the upper windows of the mains, looking towards the chief current, they saw a drift of everything belonging to farms and dwelling houses that would float: chairs and tables, chests, carts, saddles, chests of drawers, tubs of linen, beds and blankets, work-benches, harrows, gurnals, planes, cheeses, churns, spinning-wheels, cradles, iron pots, wheelbarrows. All these and many other things hurried past as they gazed. Everybody was looking, and for a time all had been silent. "Lord save us!" cried Mr. Duff with a great start, and ran for his telescope. A four-post bed came rocking down the river, now shooting straight for a short distance, now slowly wheeling, now shivering, struck by some swifter thing, now whirling giddily round in some vortex. The soaked curtains were flacking and flying in the great wind, and yes, the telescope revealed it. There was a figure in it. Dead or alive, the farmer could not tell, but it lay still. A cry burst from them all, but on swept the strange boat, bound for the world beyond the flood, and none could stay its course. The water was now in the stable, and cow-houses, and barn. A few minutes more, and it would be creeping into the kitchen. The Dower, and its tributary, the Lorrie, were about to merge their last difference on the floor of Jean's parlour. Worst of all, a rapid current had set in across the farther end of the stable, which no one had as yet observed. Jean bustled about her work as usual, nor, although it was so much augmented, would accept help from any of her guests until it came to preparing dinner, when she allowed Janet and the foreman's wife to lend her a hand. The tramp wife she would not permit to touch plate or spoon, knife or potato. The woman rose in anger at her exclusion, and leaving the house, waded to the barn. There she went up the ladder to the loft where she had slept, and threw herself on her straw bed. As there was no doing any work, Donal was out with two of the men, wading here and there where the water was not too deep, enjoying the wonder of the strange looks and curious conjunctions of things. None of them felt much of dismay at the havoc around them. Beyond their chests with their Sunday clothes, and at most 2 clean shirts, neither of the men had anything to lose worth mentioning, and for Donal, he would gladly have given even his books for such a ploy. "There's one thing, mither," he said, entering the kitchen, covered with mud, a rabbit in one hand and a large salmon in the other. "We're no like to starve, with salmon in the hedges and mappies in the trees." His master questioned him with no little incredulity. It was easy to believe in salmon anywhere, but rabbits in trees? "I catched it in the branches of a lerk," Donal answered. "Easy enough, for it couldna rin far, and was mair fleyt at the water nor at me. But for the salmon, haith I was ower and ower wi' it in the water, efter I gruppit it, ere I could call it my ain." Before the flood subsided, not a few rabbits were caught in trees, mostly spruce firs and larches. For salmon, they were taken everywhere, among grass, corn, and potatoes, in bushes and hedges and cottages. One was caught on a lawn with an umbrella. One was reported to have been found in a press bed. Another, coiled round in a pot hanging from the crook, ready to be boiled, only that he was alive and undressed. Donal was still being cross-questioned by his master when the strange woman re-entered. Lying upon her straw, she had seen through the fanlight over the stable door the swiftness of the current there passing, and understood the danger. "I doubt," she said, addressing no one in particular, "the gale o' the stable winna stand abune another half hour." "It maun fa, then," said the farmer, taking a pinch of snuff in hopeless serenity, and turning away. "Hoots!" said the woman, "dinna speak that gait, sir. It's no wise like. Tak a dram an' tak hert, an' dinna fling the calf efter the cow. Whaur's yer bottle, sir?" John paid no heed to her suggestion, but Jean took it up. "The bottle's whaur ye s' no lay han' upo' 't," she said. "Weel, gien ye hae nae mercy upo' yer whusky, ye should hae some upo' yer horse beasts onygait," said the woman indignantly. "What mean ye by that?" returned Jean, with hard voice and eye of blame. "Ye might at the least gie the poor things a chance," the woman rejoined. "Hoo wad ye do that?" said Jean. "Gien ye loose them, they would but take to the watter wi' fear, an' drown the sooner." "Na, na, Jean," interposed the farmer. "They wud tak care o' themselves to the last, an' I haud to the driest, just as ye wud yersel'." "Allooin'," said the stranger, replying to Jean, yet speaking rather as if to herself, while she thought about something else, "I wad raither drown soomin' nor tied by the heid. But what's the good o' doctorin' whaur there's onything to be done? Ye hae whaur to put them. What kin is the fleurs up the stair, sir?" she asked abruptly, turning full on her host with a flash in her deep-set black eyes. "Oh, good dale fleurs. What ither?" answered the farmer. "It's the walls, woman, not the fleurs we hae to be concernt about in this wather. Gien the jice be strong, an' weel set into the walls, what for sudna ye tak the horse up the stair intil yer bedrooms? It'll be all to the good o' the walls, for the weight o' the beasts 'll be upo' them to haud them doon, an' the hale hoose again' the watter. An' gien I was you, I would put the best o' the kye an' the nowt intil the parlour an' the kitchen here. I'm thinkin' we'll lose them a' else, for the byre walls 'll gang afore the hoose." Mr. Duff broke into a strange laughter. "Wad ye no tak up the carpets first, woman?" he said. "I wud," she answered. "That gangs on spiert, gien there was time. But I tell ye there's none, an' ye'll buy 2 or 3 carpets for the price o' one horse." "Haith, the woman's in the right!" he cried, suddenly waking up to the sense of the proposal, and shot from the house. All the women, Jean making no exception to any help now, rushed to carry the beds and blankets to the garret. Just as Mr. Duff entered the stable from the nearer end, the opposite gable fell out with a great splash, letting in the wide level vision of turbidly raging waters, fading into the obscurity of the wind-driven rain. While he stared aghast, a great tree struck the wall like a battering ram, so that the stable shook. The horses, which had been for some time moving uneasily, were now quite scared. There was not a moment to be lost. Duff shouted for his men, 1 or 2 came running, and in less than a minute more those in the house heard the iron-shod feet splashing and stamping through the water, as one after another the horses were brought across the yard to the door of the house. Mr. Duff led by the halter his favourite, Snowball, who was a good deal excited, plunging and rearing so that it was all he could do to hold him. He had ordered the men to take the others first, thinking he would follow more quietly, but the moment Snowball heard the first thundering of hoofs on the stair, he went out of his senses with terror, broke from his master, and went plunging back to the stable. Duff darted after him, but was only in time to see him rush from the further end into the swift current, where he was at once out of his depth, and was instantly caught and hurried, rolling over and over from his master's sight. He ran back into the house and up to the highest window. From that he caught sight of him a long way down, swimming. Once or twice he saw him turned heels over head, only to get his neck up again presently, and swim as well as before, but at last it was in the direction of the Daur, which would soon, his master did not doubt, sweep his carcass into the North Sea. With troubled heart he strained his sight after him as long as he could distinguish his lessening head, but it got amongst some wreck, and unable to tell any more whether he saw it or not, he returned to his men with his eyes full of tears. End of chapter 33.